At 3:20 a.m., a place in historic a place Russia called its safest fortress turned into a fireball. An $80 million warship armed with deadly caliber missiles was blinded and crippled in minutes. Not by missiles, not by jets, but by two tiny drones disguised on a fishing boat. Moscow called Temryuk Bay untouchable. Ukraine just proved them wrong. This strike has shocked the entire world. And what you're about to see will leave you speechless. But before we begin, at exactly 3:20 a.m., August 28, 2025, silence over the inland waters of Russia's Temryuk Bay was shattered. Not by the roar of engines or the flash of missiles, but by a shadowy operation that no one in Moscow thought possible. Inside what the Kremlin considered a safe, untouchable zone, more than 65 miles from Ukraine's front line, one of Russia's most dangerous strike platforms, the Buyan-M warship, valued at nearly $80 million, sat quietly at military pier number 2. It had just returned from a cruise missile strike, its crew celebrating with vodka glasses raised high as technicians reloaded the ship with 8 caliber NK missiles, each worth over $1 million and capable of devastating targets more than 950 miles away, from Kiev to Lviv, even deep into western Ukraine. Russia believed this ship was untouchable. They were wrong. What no one on deck knew was that less than 7 miles away, cutting through the dark waters, a speedboat disguised as a simple fishing vessel was closing in. From the outside it looked ordinary, nets, tarps, a casual civilian look. But inside, its true nature was lethal. Hidden beneath gray covers lay 2 Beaver model FPV suicide drones, modified for heavy strikes, each carrying an 8-pound armor-piercing warhead. At the controls sat 2 Ukrainian Special Forces operators from the 73rd Naval Center, dressed in fisherman jackets and Russian-style caps, blending perfectly into the scene. What looked like a fishing trip was, in reality, a countdown to one of the boldest naval operations Ukraine had ever executed, staged right in the middle of Russia's so-called steel nest of defense. The target was no ordinary ship. The Buyan-M may not carry the size or air wings of massive destroyers, but it is Russia's deadliest inland hunter. Built to dominate shallow waters, slip through narrow channels, and strike Ukraine from the safety of the Azov and Caspian seas. Every time it sails out of Temryuk port, it puts Ukrainian cities, power grids, fuel depots, even schools and kindergartens at risk of a new long-range missile attack. Kiev knew they could not simply wait for the next barrage. This time they would strike first, but the challenge was enormous. Temryuk port was not just a dock, it was a floating fortress. Its defenses included Panzer S-1 anti-aircraft systems, radar networks, and constant surveillance designed to swat down anything. UAVs, missiles, intruders, before they even got close. To Moscow, Temryuk Bay was a no-go zone, a steel shield where nothing could sneak in. Yet Ukraine had found a way. Exploiting the radar blind zone, skimming just feet above the water's surface, the disguised speedboat crept closer, carrying weapons that cost less than 1/500th of the missiles they were meant to destroy. By 3:27 a.m., the boat had reached within 3 miles of the warship. The 2 operators threw off the camouflage tarps and armed their drones, each about 4 feet long with a fiberglass body and wingspan of nearly 6 feet. They were almost invisible against the dark water and sky. Both were released in sequence, one named Hrom Thunder, tasked with striking the main radar mast. The second, Vidkata Retribution, programmed to hit the missile launcher itself. 2 drones, 2 targets, both launched in perfect synchronization. The first drone skimmed just 7 feet above the water, completely undetected by the Podlet K-1 radar and Panzer defense systems. Guided not by GPS, which Russia could jam, but by internal navigation and infrared optics, it locked onto its target. In a bunker hundreds of miles away, a Ukrainian operator monitored the feed, his face lit only by the black and white glow of the FPV screen. On the horizon, the warship's massive rotating radar tower loomed into view. Every second brought it closer. 900 feet, 800 feet, 600 feet. Still, there was no alarm, no reaction from the ship. At 3:31 a.m., the silence exploded. The first drone smashed into the radar mast with pinpoint accuracy. A blinding flash erupted, tearing the main antenna from its shaft, hurling fragments across the deck, showering sparks into the equipment. Flames roared upward, sensors melted, and within a fraction of a second, the Buyan-M, once a fully armed strike vessel, was thrown into tactical blindness. Its surveillance systems went dark. The crew scrambled, shouting orders, but the fire suppression systems couldn't restore vision. The radar officer lay critically wounded, struck by a shard of shrapnel that pierced the command window. Russia's air defense fortress had just been breached by a drone costing less than $2,000. And it wasn't over. 6 seconds later, from the port side, the second drone approached like a phantom at nearly 95 miles per hour. The crew, blinded and disoriented, had no radar, no cameras, no panzer defense system activated. The Buyan-M was exposed. The FPV feed showed the missile launcher bays clearly, rectangular hatches lined across the center deck, one already glowing from a pre-launch sequence. Vidplata dove at a 25-degree angle, heading straight for bay number 3. At 3:32 a.m., the second strike landed. The explosion ripped the launcher open, blowing steel plating into the air, setting off secondary fires across the deck. Black smoke poured skyward as emergency suppression systems blasted carbon dioxide over the flames. But the damage was irreversible. The launcher's control module was incinerated. Adjacent missile bays overheated dangerously. The warship tilted sharply to starboard, a sign of flooding or structural failure. In less than 7 minutes, Russia's $80 million strike platform was crippled, unable to fire, unable to defend itself. Emergency transmissions crackled across Russian naval channels. Buyan-M B-38 attacked, radar destroyed, caliber system damaged, request tow back to base. What Moscow once believed was a secure rear zone had just been pierced wide open. Ukraine's drones had done what Russia thought impossible: penetrate a fortress, blind a warship, and knock out its missile systems, all in a single coordinated strike. The strike on the Buyan-M was more than just a tactical hit. It was a direct humiliation for Russia's Black Sea fleet. Within minutes of the dual UAV assault, the warship had lost its radar, its missile system, and its stability. On deck, crew members scrambled in chaos. Some rushed to seal emergency valves, others carried the wounded away from shattered compartments. But the damage was too severe. The ship had not sunk, yet it was no longer a warship. It was now nothing more than a floating hulk, drifting under smoke and fire, calling desperately for a tow back to safety. For Russia, this wasn't simply about one vessel. The Buyan-M is a key strike platform in the Sea of Azov, specifically designed for shallow waters where larger destroyers cannot operate. With its Kaliber cruise missiles, it represented Moscow's ability to launch precision strikes hundreds of miles deep into Ukraine while staying behind heavy protective shields. Every time the Buyan-M left Temryuk port, Ukraine's largest cities braced for impact. And yet, within 7 minutes, 2 improvised drones, costing a fraction of a single missile, had ripped the ship's combat capability apart. The most shocking detail was not just the strike itself, but where it happened. Temryuk Bay was supposed to be untouchable. It was Moscow's designated safe zone, a place where ships could dock, reload, and prepare new missile salvos without fear of Ukrainian interference. Protected by layered air defenses, panzer systems, and radar stations, the Russians believed no hostile craft could even approach. But Ukraine proved otherwise, by using speedboats disguised as fishing vessels, by exploiting blind zones in radar coverage, and by timing their strike with surgical precision. Kiev's forces turned Moscow's strongest fortress into its weakest link. Hours later, as the sun rose, the world watched the evidence unfold. Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Directorate released drone footage capturing the entire sequence. The radar mast exploding in a burst of flame, then seconds later, the second UAV slamming into the missile launcher, sending fireballs and smoke columns skyward. International outlets including Naval News, Kyiv Post, Business Insider, and the Kyiv Independent verified the footage, confirming beyond doubt that the attack was real. Naval experts who reviewed the strike called it one of the boldest and most effective asymmetric naval operations of the 21st century. For the Russian Navy, the implications were devastating. The Buyan-M was forced to withdraw, limping toward Sevastopol for assessment and repairs. Analysts estimated that restoring its radar, electronics, and launch systems could take weeks, if not months, time during which the warship is out of action. In military terms, the damage was worth more than gold. Ukraine had neutralized a critical strike platform with an operation that cost less than 1% of its target's value. In psychological terms, the damage was even greater. Russia's sailors, once confident that Temryuk Bay was a sanctuary, now knew that no place was safe. This was not an isolated incident. In fact, it was the continuation of a pattern. Over the past year, Ukraine has used ingenuity, small drones, and seaborne tactics to inflict major losses on Russia's fleet. In late 2024, Ukrainian special forces disabled a Sergei Kotov-class patrol boat off the Crimean coast, forcing it to remain docked for repairs. That same year, a Caesar Kunikov-class landing ship was completely sunk by a drone-based amphibious assault. And in July 2025, Ukraine debuted a new type of sea-launched FP-5 drone, striking an offshore oil rig near Crimea that Russia had converted into a radar station. Western analysts describe that attack as a turning point in asymmetric warfare, a moment when Ukraine proved that low-cost, innovative weapons could neutralize expensive military platforms with staggering effectiveness. The Buyan-M strike has now taken that evolution one step further. These are no longer desperate last-resort attacks. They are planned, synchronized operations, carried out with disciplined timing and coordination. By using small, inexpensive UAVs, Ukraine has created a nightmare scenario for the Russian Navy. Warships worth tens of millions can now be blinded or crippled by weapons that cost less than a household car. Experts warn that this imbalance will haunt Russia for years. Each Kaliber missile costs over $1 million. Each Buyan-M ship costs tens of millions more. But the drones used against them cost less than $2,000 apiece. This ratio of cost to damage is unsustainable for Moscow. It means every Russian ship sailing in the Sea of Azov, the Black Sea, or even docked in so-called secure ports must live under constant threat. A fishing boat might not be a fishing boat. A shadow in the water could be death on approach. And it isn't just about material losses, it's about morale. The Russian Navy had long relied on the Sea of Azov's geography, shallow waters, narrow channels, inland cover, to shield its vessels from attack. That illusion is now broken. If a warship can be struck at Temryuk Bay with its overlapping radars and panzer systems, then nowhere is safe. Not in Sevastopol, not in Kerch, not in the Caspian. Every dock, every harbor, every fleet post is now under the shadow of Ukraine's drones. The symbolism is brutal. A mighty warship, blinded and burning, defeated not by a fleet, not by missiles, not by submarines, but by two small drones launched off a disguised speedboat. For Russia, it is a reminder that this war is no longer just about brute force. It is about adaptability, speed, and the clever use of every weakness. For Ukraine, it is a moment of pride, a proof that even against a larger navy, creativity and precision can tip the balance. The Buyan-M attack did more than disable a single warship. It shook the very foundation of Russia's naval strategy. For years, Moscow boasted that its inland waters, its layered defenses, and its advanced radar networks made areas like Temryuk untouchable. Yet in the early hours of August 28, two drones launched from what looked like nothing more than a fishing boat shattered that myth in front of the entire world. Hours after the strike, satellite images and independent naval assessments confirmed the damage. The warship, once armed with 8-caliber cruise missiles capable of reaching nearly any Ukrainian city, was now being towed under heavy smoke toward Sevastopol. The radar mast was gone. The missile launch system gutted, its electronic brain fried. For weeks, possibly months, the Buyan-M will remain out of combat. And during that time, every Ukrainian city spared from a caliber strike will owe its safety to two small UAVs, costing less than a fraction of a missile. Military analysts call it a textbook case of asymmetric warfare. Instead of matching Russia missile for missile, ship for ship, Ukraine is exploiting weak points, blind zones in radar, overconfidence in safe ports, and gaps in crew readiness. By doing so, Kyiv is proving that the future of naval conflict may not belong to massive fleets, but to smaller, faster, cheaper weapons that can strike at the right time in the right place, with devastating precision. And Russia knows it. From now on, every Russian vessel in the Black Sea or the Azov will have to live with the reality that a $2,000 drone can erase its combat power. Every harbor will have to double its watch. Every radar operator will stare at the horizon, wondering if the next fishing boat is just a boat or the beginning of another nightmare. This wasn't the first Russian warship disabled by drones, and it will not be the last, but the Buyan-M strike stands as one of the clearest signals yet. Ukraine's innovation is rewriting the rules of this war. The so-called safe zones are no longer safe. Expensive ships are no longer untouchable. And Russia's naval dominance in the region is no longer guaranteed. For Ukraine, it is a symbol of resilience and intelligence over brute force. For Russia, it is a message carved into steel and fire. Your strongest shields can still be pierced, your safest harbors are no longer safe, and your most prized war